morning, Eleanor, Claire, Stephanie, Sherriana, Kelsey, and Chelsea. Welcome to our Journeys class. Do you remember what we were reading about in Journeys? Well, if you look at the picture, what do you see? You see lots and lots of pretty, colorful flowers. Do you know what kind of flowers these are? These here are, they look like little cups. They're called tulips. Tulips are very popular flowers, and they come in so many different colors. And there are all sorts of different flowers here too. Are these flowers just growing by themselves? No, someone's growing them so that they grow in these nice, pretty lines and they make these beautiful patterns. This is what is it? It's a garden. So we know we're reading about gardens this time. And we read a story about someone who was growing a garden. Do you remember who that was? Did you say Frog and Toad? It was Frog and Toad. And in our story, well, if you look on page 12 in your class book, you'll see this page here. And it has our story map. So do you remember what happens in the story of Frog and Toad? If you don't, you can go back and read it one more time and then come back to this video. But if you do, and I think you do, because it was a really easy story for us, we can take a look at what goes where. In a story map, we want to put, all the important parts of a story. So first we have these two boxes up here. In the first little box, it says CHARACTERS. Now, this CH sound doesn't make ch like usual. It just says k, 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 air, actors, characters, characters. And you remember what characters are, don't you? Characters are the people or the things in our story that do the actions. Now, who are the characters in our story? Well, it is called Frog and Toad, so it must be Frog and Toad. Yes, the people in our story, or the ones that do the actions, are Frog and Toad. Now, our next box says setting. Setting. Do you know what a setting is? Well, if we go back into our picture here of the garden, let's say we were going here. What would the setting of our story be? It would be this garden. So, Frog and Toad, a setting is where the story happens. It's where the story happens. Did Frog and Toad only happen in one place? Let's think. Well, it did happen at Frog's house, but only for a short while. Then it happened at Toad's house. But where at Frog's house? Was it inside his house? No, it was in Frog's garden. The setting of the first part of the story was Frog's garden. But is that where everything happened? Is that where the important things happened? No, that was just the beginning. The important things happened where? In Toad's garden. Well, at least where he wanted to grow his garden, right? So it was happening in Toad's garden. Did you write down all those answers? Now we're going to go on to our next part. It's this big box and it says plot, plot. And a plot, an easy way to think of it is a plot is what happens in a story. A plot is what happens in a story. So we have a beginning, a middle, and an end. We want to tell what happens at the beginning of the story, the middle of the story, and at the end of the story. And you all remember the end of the story, don't you? What happened at the end of the story? Well, we should start at the beginning first. At the beginning of the story, Frog and Toad go for a walk in the garden, right? No, that doesn't sound right. Do you remember the story? At the beginning of the story, Toad sees Frog's garden. Do you remember? Toad was going by and he saw Frog's garden. And is that all he did? He just said, "Oh, a garden, Frog's garden." Okay, that's not what happened. What happened? Toad sees Frog's garden and then he wants one too. Hmm, does Toad have a garden? No. Does he want a garden? Yes. So, this is the beginning of our story. It's how our story starts, and it's what makes everything else in the story happen. Because Toad sees Frog's garden, he wants one too. How does he feel? Does he feel angry? Does he feel sad? Does he feel happy or excited? Well, he doesn't really feel any of those things. You know, there's a big kid word for when you want something that someone else wants. That word is envy. Envy. Don't worry about spelling it because it's a pretty hard word. But for now, it's just a word that you can learn. Envy. Do you ever envy something someone else has? I do sometimes. When my brother gets a new toy, I always want one too, so I feel envy. But if you let your envy get too big, it's not a good thing. Well, Toad feels some envy for Frog's garden. So, what does he do? Does he just sit there and cry and say, "I want a garden"? Or does Frog look at him and say, "Ha ha ha ha, I have a garden and you don't have one"? Is that what happened? No. We know that Frog and Toad are good friends. So what did Frog do? Well, this is the middle part of our story. It's how the characters take care of the things they want. And what did they do? Well, Frog gives Toad some seeds to grow. That's right. Instead of saying, "Ha ha, I have a garden and you don't," and instead of Toad just crying, Frog gives Toad some seeds. And what will he do with them? He will grow them. Now, Frog gave Toad some seeds, so the story's finished, right? Of course it's not. First, those seeds have to grow. And who has to grow them? Toad has to grow them. But is he very good at growing them? What does he do when he puts them in the ground? He shouts at his seeds. Oh no! Toad shouts at his seeds. Do they grow? Nope, they don't grow. So how does Toad feel? He feels very sad, doesn't he? Well, then Frog, being the good friend that he is, gives him another idea. What idea does Frog give him? He says, "Be nice to the seeds." So what does Toad do? Toad sings and reads to his seeds. Do you remember that part? Because they weren't growing and Frog told him that the seeds were afraid. So instead of shouting all the time, Toad begins to sing and he reads nice things to his seeds. Now, what happens in the end of our story? How does our story finish? Do you remember how it finishes? Well, at the beginning, we see what makes everything happen. Toad wants a garden. In the middle, we see how he tries to get that thing he wants. And in the end, well, what happens? He gets it. The seeds begin to grow. That's right. The seeds begin to grow by the end of the story. And that's how he gets what he wants. Now,